The history books you were given are filled with a comforting lie. It's a story whispered to children and proclaimed from podiums that the good are rewarded, that justice prevails, and that virtue is its own shield. We are taught to admire the gentle, the righteous, the honorable. But history is not a moral play. It is a graveyard of noble intentions. It is a testament to the stark, cold reality that the world is not governed by those who are right, but by those who are left. The meek do not inherit the earth. They are buried in it by those who understand the unforgiving mechanics of power. The narrative of our world is written by the victors, and victory, it turns out, has very little to do with being good. This is a truth we instinctively feel but are taught to suppress. We see it in the quiet injustices of the workplace, the brutal calculus of international politics, and the savage theater of social media. We champion ideals of fairness and equality, yet we reward ruthless efficiency and strategic dominance. We build monuments to saints, but follow the blueprints of conquerors. This dissonance is the central conflict of our existence, a struggle between the world as we wish it were and the world as it is. To navigate this treacherous landscape without understanding its hidden rules is not a sign of purity, but of naivete. It is to walk onto a battlefield armed with prayers, expecting them to stop a sword. The tragedy is that the sword does not care what you believe. This is not a lesson in cynicism, but in clarity. It is an invitation to look behind the curtain, to study the machinery that operates beneath the stage of civilization, to understand why a well-meaning leader can be torn apart, why a brilliant idea can be crushed, and why a virtuous life can end in ruin. Because in the unforgiving arena of human ambition, goodness is not enough. It never was. To survive the game, you must first admit that you are in one. You must understand its darkest rules. And so our journey begins not in a classroom of ethics, but in the shadow of the gallows where we confront the most dangerous philosopher in history, Niccolò Machiavelli. History does not remember the kind, it remembers those who won. To understand the man, you must first understand his world. Imagine Florence in the late 15th century. It is the heart of the Renaissance, a city of breathtaking art and revolutionary ideas, the home of Michelangelo and Leonardo. But beneath this veneer of cultural splendor lies a cauldron of political instability. Italy is not a unified nation, but a fractured mosaic of rival city-states, each scheming and battling for dominance. Mercenary armies, loyal only to the highest bidder, march across the landscape. The Pope in Rome is not just a spiritual leader, but a warlord, commanding armies and forging alliances. In this world, a state's survival depends not on its ideals, but on its ability to anticipate betrayal and project strength. This is the world that forged Niccolò Machiavelli, a world where a single misstep could lead to exile, execution, or the complete annihilation of one's homeland. Into this vortex steps Machiavelli, not as a prince or a tyrant, but as a dedicated public servant. For 14 years, he served as a senior official and diplomat for the Florentine Republic. He was a man in the machine, dispatched on missions to the courts of kings, emperors, and popes. He stood in the presence of great and terrible leaders, observing their methods, dissecting their strategies, and recording their successes and failures with a cold, analytical eye. He saw the charisma of Cesare Borgia, a man who built a state through a terrifying combination of charm, brutality, and calculated deception. Machiavelli was not theorizing from an ivory tower. He was on the front lines, learning that power had its own grammar, its own brutal logic, and it had nothing to do with the sermons he heard in church. Then, in 1512, the wheel of fortune turned. The powerful Medici family, backed by papal armies, returned to Florence and dissolved the republic he had faithfully served. Machiavelli, a key figure of the old regime, was immediately cast out. His name was added to a list of conspirators. He was arrested, imprisoned, and subjected to the horrors of the strappado, a form of torture where the victim's hands are tied behind their back and they are hoisted into the air by their wrists, dislocating their shoulders. Though he maintained his innocence, his world was shattered. Stripped of his position, his honor, and his purpose, he was exiled to his small family farm outside the city. It was here, in the forced quiet of political irrelevance, that the diplomat's quill became the philosopher's scalpel. From this place of desperation, the prince was born. It was not intended as a universal guide to evil, as it is so often portrayed. It was something far more practical and urgent, a memorandum on the nature of power, written as a plea for employment to the new Medici ruler. It was Machiavelli's attempt to prove his continued worth, to show the new prince that he, a servant of the fallen republic, still possessed knowledge that was vital for survival. The book was, in essence, a distillation of every hard lesson he had learned in the courts of Europe. It was a handbook on how to seize a state and hold it, how to build an army, how to manage rivals, and when to be merciful and when to be cruel. He was offering the Medici a map of the treacherous terrain he knew so well. This is the source of the book's enduring and unsettling power. Was Machiavelli simply describing the world as he saw it, holding up a mirror to the ruthless actions of the leaders of his time, or was he prescribing a path, teaching future rulers how to cast aside morality for the sake of political expediency? This question has echoed for 5 centuries. He never claims the methods are good, only that they are effective. He replaces the question of what is right with the question of what works. And in doing so, he forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth, that the mechanisms of power operate on a plane beyond our conventional notions of good and evil. This is why he is not a historical relic, but a contemporary whisper in the ear of every leader today. The first and most difficult lesson Machiavelli teaches is the dismantling of a grand and comforting lie, the belief that to be good is to be strong. We are raised on stories of righteous underdogs who triumph through sheer force of will and moral clarity. Yet in the unforgiving theater of power, this narrative is not just flawed, it is dangerous. Machiavelli argues that the prince or any leader who operates under the assumption that men are inherently good will inevitably build his state on sand. He understood that relying solely on justice, loyalty, and virtue in a world populated by the ambitious, the treacherous, and the desperate is a recipe for ruin. To refuse to see the darkness in human nature is to become its first and easiest victim. It is a form of blindness that the pragmatic cannot afford. Consider the fate of Girolamo Savonarola, a man who was Machiavelli's contemporary and a living experiment in this very principle. Savonarola was a Dominican friar who, through fiery sermons against corruption and sin, rose to become the de facto ruler of Florence. He was, by all accounts, a man of sincere faith and unwavering moral conviction, intent on forging a city of God on earth. For a time, the people were captivated by his vision. They burned their vanities, books, art, fine clothes, in massive bonfires, swept up in a wave of piety. He was loved, he was admired, and he was profoundly good. But his power rested entirely on his words and the fickle devotion of the masses. He was, as Machiavelli would later write, an unarmed prophet. Inevitably, his radicalism created powerful enemies, including the Pope himself. When these forces conspired against him, Savonarola had no recourse. He had disdained the worldly tools of power. He had no loyal army, no network of strategic alliances built on mutual interest, and no willingness to employ ruthless means to silence his opposition. He believed his divine mandate was his shield, and so when the political tide turned and the crowds grew silent, his enemies dragged him from his monastery. The man who had ruled Florence with scripture was tortured, hanged, and his body burned in the main public square. His goodness did not save him. It was, in fact, the very thing that made him vulnerable and sealed his doom. A young Niccolò Machiavelli witnessed this entire saga unfold. It was a brutal, real-world lesson in the impotence of abstract ideals. Savonarola's ashes were a testament to the fact that power, once gained, cannot be maintained by faith and popular affection alone. It requires institutions, arms, and a leader willing to be as cunning as his enemies. This event cemented in Machiavelli's mind the fundamental difference between private morality and political necessity. What makes a good man is not what makes an effective leader. A leader's primary virtue is not piety or kindness, but the ability to guarantee the survival and prosperity of the state, and that often requires descending into the realm of fear, force, and calculated deception. This same drama plays out today, though the stage has changed. Think of the visionary startup founded on principles of ethical sourcing, employee well-being, and a genuinely superior product. It enters a market dominated by a corporate giant that operates on a single principle: profit. The giant can use its immense resources to slash prices, launch a deceptive marketing campaign, or even acquire the startup's suppliers to choke its supply chain. The better company, operating with a virtuous but rigid rulebook, is often dismantled piece by piece by an opponent playing a different, more brutal game. The market, like the Florentine mob, does not ultimately reward virtue. It rewards dominance and survival. We see this in the political arena with painful clarity. A candidate who vows to remain completely positive, to never attack their opponent, and to be entirely transparent is often praised by pundits but eviscerated in the polls. Their transparency is reframed as a lack of discretion, their positivity as a lack of fighting spirit. Their opponent, meanwhile, can use strategically leaked opposition research, craft emotionally manipulative advertisements, and make promises tailored to specific demographics, all while accusing the good candidate of being naive and out of touch. The refusal to engage in the darker arts of politics is not seen as a mark of honor, but as a disqualifying weakness in a world that demands strength. Here, however, the lesson takes a deeply uncomfortable turn. If weakness is a vice and effectiveness a virtue, what are we to make of the historical figures we revere as heroes? Consider Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, who, in his quest to preserve the Union, suspended the writ of habeas corpus, imprisoning thousands of American citizens without trial. He authorized measures that, under any other circumstance, would be deemed tyrannical. He understood that the preservation of the ideal, the United States itself, required him to temporarily sacrifice some of the very liberties he fought to protect. He was not acting as a saint, he was acting as a prince, prioritizing the state's survival above all else. Similarly, Winston Churchill, the man who stood against the darkness of Nazism, employed widespread deception, propaganda, and morally ambiguous alliances to secure victory. He famously said, "In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies." These leaders, lionized in our history books, were not naive idealists. They were masters of the political game who recognized that to defeat a monster, one cannot be constrained by the rules of a gentleman's debate. They wielded Machiavellian tools not for personal gain, but in service of a greater cause. This forces us to ask a disturbing question. Is it possible that the good we admire in them was only made possible by the bad they were willing to do? Having established that the world is a battlefield, Machiavelli proceeds to arm his prince with the necessary tools for victory. He begins with the most famous and unsettling question a leader can face. Is it better to be loved or to be feared? His answer is cold, pragmatic, and devoid of sentiment. Ideally, one should be both, but since this is difficult to achieve, it is far safer to be feared than to be loved. Love, he explains, is a bond of obligation, a chain forged from gratitude. But because men are inherently self-interested and ungrateful, they will break this chain whenever it is convenient. Fear, however, is a much more reliable motivator. It is maintained by a dread of punishment, a consequence that a prince can control absolutely. Affection is a gift from your subjects. Fear is a weapon you hold in your own hand. To rely on love is to build a foundation on the most unstable of grounds. A leader who is merely loved is a hostage to public opinion. He is popular when he bestows favors, lowers taxes, and presides over times of prosperity. But when a crisis demands sacrifice, when unpopular decisions must be made for the long-term health of the state, this love quickly curdles into resentment. The same crowds that cheered his name will be the first to call for his head. Love is a fair-weather friend. A leader dependent on it will hesitate to act decisively, constantly looking over his shoulder, afraid to discipline his people for their own good. He will be, in essence, a follower, not a leader, and his reign will be short and chaotic. The fear Machiavelli advocates for must be understood with precision. It is not the arbitrary and capricious terror of a bloodthirsty tyrant, which only inspires hatred and breeds rebellion. Hatred is a mortal danger to any ruler. Instead, the prince should inspire a form of awe and respect, rooted in the absolute certainty of his power. The people must understand that the law is not a suggestion, and that any challenge to the state's authority will be met with swift and unwavering consequences. This type of fear creates stability. It allows a prince to maintain order and make difficult decisions without fearing a loss of popular affection. He must be the calm center of the storm, respected for his strength, not despised for his cruelty. This leads to his chilling advice on the economy of violence. When cruelty is necessary to secure power, whether to eliminate a political rival or to suppress an insurrection, it must be, as he says, well used. This means it should be inflicted decisively and all at once. A single sharp act of violence sends a powerful message and then allows for a return to normalcy. The shock is potent, but brief. A leader who engages in lingering, piecemeal cruelties, however, forces his subjects to live in constant anxiety. He never allows the wound to heal, fostering a deep and abiding hatred that will eventually consume him. For Machiavelli, a single strategic act of brutality that secures peace is, in the long run, more merciful than 1,000 smaller acts of indecisive violence. Furthermore, the prince must master the art of appearances. He must understand that he lives on a public stage, and the vast majority of people judge by what they see, not by the complex realities of governance. Therefore, it is not necessary for a leader to actually possess all the virtuous qualities, such as mercy, honesty, and piety, but it is absolutely essential that he appear to possess them. He must project an aura of unwavering integrity, even as he acts with cunning pragmatism behind closed doors. He must be a great pretender and dissembler, ready to act against faith, against charity, against humanity, and against religion when the survival of his state requires it. The goal is to maintain the illusion of virtue, which inspires loyalty, while never allowing that illusion to constrain necessary action. To synthesize this dual nature, Machiavelli offers his most potent metaphor. The prince must learn to be both the lion and the fox. The lion is mighty, a symbol of overwhelming force that can frighten off the wolves of opposition. But the lion is also simple-minded and can easily fall into traps. The fox, on the other hand, is cunning and astute. It can recognize the traps, navigate the intricate webs of conspiracy, and outsmart its enemies. But the fox lacks the raw power to defend itself from a direct assault. A leader who is only a lion will be a blunt instrument, eventually outmaneuvered. A leader who is only a fox will be seen as weak and overthrown. The true prince must combine the lion's ferocious strength with the fox's subtle intellect, knowing when to roar and when to lay a snare. Let's transpose this to a familiar modern battleground, the corporate office. Imagine a new director inheriting a department plagued by infighting and a culture of lax accountability. A purely loved approach of team-building exercises and open-door policies would be seen as weakness and exploited. Instead, the director acts with Machiavellian precision. First, she is the fox. She spends a month quietly observing, documenting performance issues, identifying the key agitators, and understanding the hidden power dynamics. She builds her case. Then she becomes the lion. In a single week, she restructures the team, reassigns the worst offenders to dead-end projects, and makes a public example of one by terminating them for clear, documented cause. The message is swift, decisive, and unmistakable. A new order is established, not on affection, but on a healthy fear of her authority and competence. The department's productivity soars. It is brutal, but it is effective. The castles and courtyards of Renaissance Italy may seem distant, but the principles that govern them operate with chilling efficiency in our modern world. The daggers have been replaced by data, the poison by propaganda, but the essence of the game remains unchanged because human nature is a constant. The modern battlefield is not a physical place, but a psychological space. The corporate office, the stock market, and the vast, chaotic territory of the internet. Here, ambition, fear, and the thirst for power still drive the central conflicts. Machiavelli's prince did not die in the 16th century. He simply traded his velvet robes for a business suit and his signet ring for a smartphone, proving that technology evolves, but the tactics of power are timeless. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the corporate world, our modern-day equivalent of the royal court. Office politics is a direct translation of the courtly intrigue Machiavelli so expertly dissected. Alliances are forged in conference rooms, based not on friendship, but on mutual ambition, and these partnerships are abandoned the moment they cease to be useful. A skilled executive, like a shrewd prince, must manage his ambitious subordinates, subtly playing their egos against one another to ensure no single person becomes a threat to his own position. Information is the new currency of power. A strategically timed email or a carefully planted rumor in the right ear can advance a career or end one, proving more effective than any physical weapon. The public square where the prince must manage his reputation has become the infinite, unforgiving arena of social media. Here, perception is reality, and a leader's image is a territory that must be constantly fortified and defended. A modern prince uses social media as a tool to project the mask of virtue, showcasing their company's charitable work, their commitment to social causes, their carefully curated personal life. Meanwhile, in the background, they employ the fox's cunning, using sophisticated data analytics and targeted advertising to shape public opinion and undermine their rivals. They understand that an online mob, skillfully provoked and directed, can be a formidable weapon, capable of destroying a competitor's reputation in a matter of hours. In this new war, the most potent weapons are information and its dark twin, disinformation. Machiavelli wrote of the importance of a strong army, but today dominance is achieved by controlling the narrative. A well-executed disinformation campaign can cripple a rival company by spreading false rumors about its products, sending its stock price plummeting. In politics, it can discredit a candidate by amplifying a minor gaffe into a major scandal, or by fabricating entire events. The ultimate cunning of the modern fox is to create a state of information chaos, flooding the digital world with so much conflicting noise that the public, exhausted and confused, becomes susceptible to the simplest, most emotionally appealing narrative, regardless of its connection to the truth. The modern prince's fortress is not built of stone and mortar, but of networks and strategic alliances. Power is consolidated by building a web of influence, placing loyal lieutenants in key positions, across different sectors of industry and media. It is about forging symbiotic relationships with other powerful players, creating a system of mutual dependence where an attack on one is an attack on all. This network serves as both a formidable defense, providing early warnings of incoming threats, and a powerful platform from which to launch coordinated strategic moves. In this interconnected world, exile is not being banished to a farm. It is being severed from the network, rendered isolated and powerless. Here we arrive at the modern Machiavellian paradox, the most dangerous trap for the well-intentioned. Your own virtues can be expertly weaponized against you. Consider a CEO who, in the spirit of modern leadership, champions radical transparency. They openly share the company's challenges and setbacks with their employees and the public, hoping to build a culture of trust and honesty. A ruthless competitor can immediately seize upon this. They will reframe this transparency not as strength, but as an admission of incompetence and instability. The CEO's honest words are twisted and amplified, creating panic among shareholders and clients. Their virtue becomes the very instrument of their downfall, a textbook example of a good quality being a fatal political liability. This vulnerability is starkly visible in our public discourse. An honest leader who attempts to give a nuanced, thoughtful answer to a complex issue will be annihilated by an opponent who delivers a simple, powerful, and emotionally resonant lie. The lie is perfectly engineered for the modern attention economy. It's easily converted into a viral soundbite, a shareable meme, a rallying cry. While the honest leader is mired in the messy work of explaining reality, appearing defensive and academic, the lie has already circled the globe. They are defeated not because they were wrong, but because they were honest in a game that rewards speed and emotional impact over truth. This proves Machiavelli's most unsettling lesson. You must play the game according to the rules as they are, not as you wish them to be. But no philosophy, especially one so ruthlessly practical, comes without a cost. Machiavelli provides a masterclass on how to acquire and maintain power, but he remains hauntingly silent on how to live with it. The strategies that forge a prince also unmake the man. To adopt this worldview is to accept a life sentence of vigilance and suspicion. The crown once placed upon your head is not merely a symbol of authority. It is a brand of profound isolation. It is the price of seeing the world as a chessboard. You may become the master of the game, but you will forget how to be anything other than a player. The humanity that you sacrifice for the sake of the state is ultimately your own. The first casualty in the prince's war is trust. In a world where every individual acts out of self-interest, genuine connection becomes an unaffordable luxury. A leader who follows Machiavelli's advice must view every interaction through a lens of calculation. An ally is merely a temporary convenience. A loyal servant is a potential usurper, and even the affection of family can be a mask for ambition. This constant state of suspicion dissolves the bonds of authentic human relationships. The prince is surrounded by a crowd, but is utterly alone, unable to confide, unable to love without reservation, unable to find solace in another's company. He is the lonely center of a web of transactions, a ghost haunting his own court. This perpetual vigilance exacts a terrible psychological toll. The mind of the prince can never be at rest. It is a machine of constant calculation, endlessly analyzing threats, anticipating betrayals, and rehearsing future moves. There is no room for spontaneity, for simple joy, or for the quiet peace of an unguarded moment. The world ceases to be a place to be lived in and becomes a complex system of dangers and opportunities to be managed. This hypervigilance is a prison for the soul, a self-imposed sentence of paranoia that drains the color from life, leaving only the cold, gray calculus of survival. The very mindset that allows you to win the game ensures you can never enjoy the victory. To protect himself, the prince builds fortresses, not just of stone, but of secrecy and emotional distance. He surrounds himself with guards, advisors, and layers of protocol designed to insulate him from his enemies. He achieves a state of supreme physical security, untouchable and unassailable. Yet these same walls that keep his enemies out also lock him in. He becomes a prisoner within his own sanctuary, sealed off from the unfiltered reality of the world he governs. The throne room, the seat of his immense power, becomes the loneliest place on earth. The silence is absolute, broken only by the echo of his own strategic thoughts, a constant reminder of his magnificent and desolate solitude. We see this tragic archetype in our own time, in the gilded cages of modern power. The top-tier CEO, the head of state, the global celebrity, They live lives of immense influence, yet profound isolation. Their days are meticulously scheduled, their interactions are carefully managed by handlers, and their privacy is non-existent. They cannot walk down the street, have a spontaneous conversation with a stranger, or form a new friendship without questioning the other person's motives. They are insulated from ordinary life by the very power they worked so hard to acquire. They have the freedom to command the world, but have lost the simple freedom to exist within it. Their power has become their prison, and here we discover the final cruel paradox of the Machiavellian quest. The entire enterprise is undertaken for the sake of security and self-preservation. One seeks power to become invulnerable, to reach a position where no one can cause you harm. Yet the moment you ascend the throne, you achieve the exact opposite. You do not become safer, you become the single most valuable target in the entire landscape. Your power makes you the object of every subordinate's ambition, every rival's envy, and every revolutionary's hatred. The fortress you built to keep the world at bay becomes a beacon, attracting the attention of everyone who desires what you have. In your ruthless pursuit to be safe from all, you have made all a potential threat. By trusting no one, you ensure that no one is truly on your side. The power you amassed to guarantee your survival becomes the very reason you are under constant siege. You are the king on the chessboard, the most powerful piece, and for that very reason, the most hunted, the one whose capture ends the game. This is the ultimate price of the crown, the tragic endpoint of a purely pragmatic philosophy. You win the game only to find that the prize is a throne in the center of a battlefield, where you will spend the rest of your days waiting for the inevitable checkmate. And so, we arrive at the end of the lesson. The tools have been displayed. The rules of the game have been revealed. We have journeyed through the blood-soaked politics of Renaissance Italy and walked the sterile corridors of modern power. But this was never just a historical exercise. The true purpose was not for you to understand Machiavelli. It was for you to understand the world he described, and more uncomfortably, to understand yourself within it. This knowledge is not a chapter in a book that you can simply close. It is a key, it is a weapon, and it has been placed deliberately into your hands. The only question now is whether you have the courage or the audacity to use it. Imagine yourself at a critical juncture. It could be a career-defining promotion, the launch of a business you've poured your life into, or a community project you believe in. You have worked tirelessly, with integrity and dedication, but you have a rival, someone less skilled but more politically astute. They have subtly taken credit for your successes, whispered doubts about your competence to those in power, and built alliances based on charm and empty promises. You see your life's work about to be stolen by someone playing a different game. You are standing at a precipice, and the winds of injustice are threatening to push you over the edge. You have a choice. You can follow the path of conventional morality, the one prescribed in fairy tales and commencement speeches. You can believe that your merit will shine through, that the truth will come out, and that the system will ultimately reward your quiet, noble efforts. You can choose to be the good person, rising above the fray, refusing to sink to their level. You can hold on to your virtue as you watch them ascend the throne that should have been yours. This is the path of the unarmed prophet. You will be righteous, admired for your principles, and utterly comprehensively defeated. Your integrity will be your epitaph. Or you can choose to act. You can accept the reality of the battlefield you are on. You can become the fox, quietly gathering evidence of your rivals' deceptions, documenting their failures and understanding the network of their influence. You can forge your own strategic alliances, not based on sentiment, but on the mutual self-interest of others who are also threatened. Then, at the moment of maximum impact, you can become the lion, not with a roar of anger, but with a cold, precise strike, a public revelation, a perfectly executed maneuver that exposes your rival's incompetence and solidifies your own power. You will not have been kind, you will not have been nice, but you will have won. This is the uncomfortable epiphany. The terrible power of Machiavelli's work is not that it teaches us something new about the world, but that it confirms something ancient and unsettling about ourselves, that the capacity for such ruthless calculation lies dormant within us all. The line between the virtuous victim and the effective prince is not a fixed wall of moral character. It is a situational decision. The knowledge is now yours. You see the path. You understand the mechanics. You know how to be cunning, how to be strategic, and how to be feared. The discomfort you feel is the recognition of your own potential to wield these dark arts. What happens when the stakes are raised? What if it is not a promotion at stake, but the survival of your family, the security of your community, the future of a nation? When faced with an existential threat, do the ethics of peacetime still apply? Machiavelli's philosophy is so enduringly seductive because it offers an answer for moments of crisis. It provides a brutal permission slip to do what is necessary for survival, freeing you from the paralysis of conventional morality. It reframes the question from a passive, "What should a good person do?" to an active, urgent, "What must be done to ensure victory?" The mirror has been held up. The person staring back is not a 16th century Florentine diplomat. It is you. It is a version of you that now understands the physics of power, that sees the hidden levers and gears that move the world. This knowledge cannot be unlearned. It will be there in your next negotiation, your next conflict, your next moment of ambition. You now see the world as a game, whether you choose to play as a pawn, content with the illusion of moral purity, or as a prince, willing to bear the burden of difficult choices, is no longer an unconscious default. It is a conscious, deliberate, and terrifying decision. The game is underway. Our journey ends here not with an answer, but with a profound and unsettling question. We have stripped away the comforting veil of idealism to gaze upon the cold, hard machinery of power. We have learned its brutal mechanics, examined its modern applications, and felt the chilling weight of its psychological cost. The ultimate lesson of Machiavelli is this: power is not a moral issue. It is a natural force, as amoral and as omnipresent as gravity. It can be used to build an empire, or to shelter the weak, to crush a rival, or to protect a principle. But one thing is certain: it cannot be ignored. To pretend this force does not govern human affairs is the most naive and dangerous delusion of all. For 5 centuries, the world has used the name Machiavellian as an accusation, a synonym for treachery and evil. But perhaps we have been using him as a scapegoat for a reality we are too afraid to confront. Perhaps Niccolò Machiavelli was not a teacher of darkness, but simply an honest cartographer of it. He did not invent the treacherous landscape of human ambition, he only drew the map. He gave us a guide to the mountains of fear, the rivers of deception, and the hidden snares of betrayal that have always defined the struggle for power. To condemn the mapmaker for the existence of the territory is to fundamentally misunderstand his purpose. He gave us not a moral compass, but a clear-eyed diagnosis of the world. You are free, of course, to burn this map. You can choose to navigate the world guided solely by your own moral code, to believe in the inherent goodness of others, and to place your faith in the arc of justice. It is a noble choice, but it is also a choice of extreme vulnerability. In the unforgiving game of power, refusing to learn the rules does not grant you an exemption. It merely guarantees you will be a casualty. The predators of this world do not spare the prey, simply because the prey refuses to acknowledge their existence. To ignore the nature of the game is to silently consent to being a pawn, forever moved and sacrificed by the will of others. The alternative is to accept the map and the terrible clarity it provides, to learn the rules, to understand the strategies, and to recognize the currents of power as they flow around you. This path is not one of evil, but of agency. Yet it comes with the burdens we have explored: the solitude of the strategist, the paranoia of the prince, and the permanent loss of a simpler, more innocent worldview. To be a player is to accept the full weight of your actions, to live with moral ambiguity, and to walk through the world with your eyes wide open. It is the acceptance of a profound and difficult responsibility. It is the price of no longer being a pawn, and so the final choice rests with you. Machiavelli offered his prince a manual on how to survive. What has been offered to you is a mirror. The knowledge of how power truly works is now a part of you, and it cannot be unlearned. The world is the same as it was yesterday, but you are now different. You see the board, you see the pieces, and you see the moves. The question is no longer if you are in the game. The only question is how you will choose to play. Power is waiting. What will you do with it?